The ER doors stayed shut for 3 long seconds, too quiet for a Saturday night. Then the first gurney hit the floor like a warning shot. "Move!" someone yelled. "We're full!" Blood streaked the tiles. A man on the stretcher tried to speak, but nothing came out, just a wet, panicked gasp. Behind him, a second patient convulsed, eyes wide, fingers clawing at air that wasn't there. Near the wall, Mara Ellis, badge flipped, intern printed too large, stood with a clipboard nobody gave her. A nurse brushed past her hard enough to make her stumble. "Stay out of the way," the charge nurse snapped. "Don't freeze on me." Mara didn't argue. She watched the man's throat. She watched the way his lips turned gray. She watched the faint chemical shine on his jacket sleeve. And when the overhead speakers crackled, code triage. "All available staff to emergency." Mara stepped forward like she'd done this before. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just with the calm of someone who already knew what was coming. Because in the next few minutes, the hospital would realize the same thing. They had been wrong about her. The hospital at night had a sound all its own, machines breathing for people, shoes whispering over tile, the low murmur of voices that never quite rose. Mara Ellis learned that sound quickly. She let it wash over her as she tied her hair back and stepped through the emergency department doors. Her badge swung once, then settled against her chest. Intern was printed in bold, the font slightly too large, like a warning label. She took her place near the nurse's station, clipboard tucked under her arm. No one looked at her. That was fine. Mara didn't need attention to do her job. The charge nurse, Denise, ran the board with a pen and a sharp jaw. "We're short 2 beds," she said to no one in particular. "If anyone's got ideas that don't involve miracles, now's the time." A resident shrugged. "It's Saturday. Then pray faster." Mara watched. She watched how Denise leaned closer to the screen when a patient decompensated. How the respiratory therapist favored his left side. How security drifted closer to the ambulance bay when radios crackled with updates. She cataloged it all without writing anything down. A trauma tech handed her gloves. "You can restock room 5. "Yes," Mara said. She moved quickly, efficiently. Supplies went back where they belonged, labels facing out. She checked suction, oxygen, the crash cart seal. Everything was where it should be. That mattered. Order mattered. When she returned, Denise pointed at her without looking up. "You interns stand by. Don't jump in unless someone asks." Mara nodded. Understood. She took a position near the wall. From there, she could see the doors, the hallway, the monitors. She kept her hands still. Calm was contagious. Panic was louder. The first ambulance call came in as a routine update. Multi-vehicle collision. Highway on-ramp. Unknown injuries. The dispatcher's voice was clipped, careful with words. Denise frowned at the screen. "That's vague." "It's always vague," the resident said. Mara tilted her head slightly. She listened again, not to the words, but to the space between them. Dispatchers filled silence when things were normal. This one didn't. She didn't speak. Minutes passed. A patient with chest pain, a drunk with a head laceration. The ER found its rhythm again. Mara assisted where she was asked, hands steady, eyes alert. She anticipated needs without stepping on toes. She passed instruments before being requested. She moved when people needed space. No one commented. That was the rule. Interns were useful when quiet. Then the overhead lights flickered once, not enough to alarm anyone, enough for Mara to notice. She glanced at the ambulance bay doors, still closed. Security shifted their stance. One of them touched his radio, then let his hand fall away. Denise's phone buzzed. She read the message, then looked up. "Heads up, incoming in 2. "How many?" someone asked. Didn't say. The doors stayed shut. Mara's breathing slowed, in through the nose. Out through the mouth. She grounded herself in small details. The smell of antiseptic, the hum of the vents, the faint vibration through the floor when a gurney rolled somewhere beyond the wall. A nurse brushed past her, clipped her shoulder. "Sorry, don't freeze up, okay?" "I won't," Mara said quietly. She shifted her weight, adjusting her angle so she could see the reflection in the glass. The ambulance bay lights flared bright white. Shadows moved behind the doors. Denise raised her voice. "Trauma team, positions." People moved. Masks went on. Gloves snapped tight. The air changed, thicker now, electric with expectation. The doors finally burst open. The first gurney came through hard, wheels rattling, momentum unchecked. Blood streaked the tiles. A paramedic shouted vitals that didn't line up. The patient's breathing was wrong, too shallow, too fast, like his lungs were fighting him. Behind him came another, then another. "Where do you want them?" Someone yelled. "We're full." Denise snapped back. Mara's eyes flicked to the first patient's throat. She saw the swelling. She saw the discoloration creeping at the edges of his lips. She saw the faint sheen on his jacket sleeve, too uniform to be sweat. She stepped forward half a pace. Stopped. "Intern," Denise barked, not looking at her. "Out of the way." Mara stepped back. She didn't argue. Arguing wasted time. The overhead speakers crackled. "Code triage. All available staff to emergency." The words echoed down the hall, heavy with consequence. A second patient convulsed. A nurse swore under her breath. The rhythm of the room began to slip, voices overlapping, instructions colliding. Mara felt it then. Not fear, recognition. This wasn't just an accident. Accidents were messy but familiar. This had edges, intent, a pattern that hadn't fully revealed itself yet. She adjusted her stance, angling toward the airway cart without touching it. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't make a show. She simply watched. Calculated. Waited for the moment when action mattered more than permission. Because when chaos came, and it was coming, someone would need to cut through it. And Mara Ellis already knew how. The emergency department didn't explode into chaos all at once. It bent first. Monitors chirped out of rhythm. A nurse repeated the same question twice without realizing it. Someone laughed once, sharp, brittle, and then stopped. The air felt heavier, as if the vents couldn't quite keep up. Mara stayed near the periphery, where she could see everything without being seen. She watched Denise's jaw tighten as she reassigned beds that didn't exist. Watched the resident's confidence slip a half-inch when the second patient's oxygen saturation dropped despite a clear airway. "Why isn't this working?" He muttered. Mara knew why. She didn't say it. The paramedics hovered longer than usual after handoff. That was the first real sign. They didn't linger unless something followed them inside. One of them, mid-30s, steady hands, pulled his gloves off slowly, like he was thinking through each motion. He leaned close to Denise and spoke low enough that only she could hear. Denise's eyes flicked once toward the doors, then toward security. "Okay," she said. "Thanks." She didn't ask questions. That worried Mara more than if she had. A tech wheeled past with a portable fan. "Decon asked for this." "Decon?" the resident echoed. "For a crash?" The tech shrugged. "That's what I was told." Mara's gaze sharpened. Decontamination wasn't standard for vehicle collisions unless there was fuel exposure, industrial runoff, or something no one wanted to name yet. She tracked the fan's path until it disappeared down the hall toward a storage room that hadn't been used for decon in months. She moved closer to the paramedics, keeping her voice low. "What did you see at the scene?" The man hesitated, eyes flicking to her badge. "Intern." "Nothing I can put on paper," he said carefully. "But people were down before we touched them, not just injured. A couple weren't breathing right." "Burns?" Mara asked. "No. Smell? Maybe, hard to tell." Mara nodded once. She didn't push. Pushing closed doors. Listening opened them. Another gurney rolled in. This patient wasn't bleeding. His skin was flushed, eyes glassy, breath coming in shallow bursts. He clawed weakly at the sheet. "Get me a mask," the nurse said. "Non-rebreather." Mara watched the man's chest. Watched the way his muscles strained like they were working against something invisible. "This isn't hypoxia from trauma," she said quietly, more to herself than anyone else. The resident shot her a look. "Intern, unless you've got something useful." "I do," Mara replied, calm, level. His airways clear. "Oxygen won't fix the problem." "What problem?" Mara didn't answer right away. She scanned the room again, counted staff, counted exits, counted patients whose symptoms didn't match their stories. Before she could speak, Denise cut in. "We'll reassess in a minute. For now, follow protocol." Protocol. A word people leaned on when they didn't know what else to do. Mara stepped back. She let them place the mask. She let them chase numbers that wouldn't hold. She noted the wasted seconds, the rising frustration. She marked it all internally. Security radios crackled again, this time louder. "Say again," one guard said. The reply was muffled, but Mara caught enough. Someone asking questions, trying to get past. She turned her head slightly. A man stood near the entrance to the treatment hallway, hands raised in a placating gesture. He wore jeans and a jacket too clean for an accident scene. His eyes moved constantly, not panicked, but searching. Family members stayed close to walls. This man tested boundaries. Mara shifted positions, placing herself where she could see both him and the critical patients. She didn't approach. Not yet. A nurse coughed, once, then again. "You okay?" Denise asked. "Yeah," the nurse said, but she took a step back, rubbing her throat. Mara felt the pieces slide closer together. Toxic exposure didn't announce itself loudly. It crept. She moved toward the supply room and quietly pulled out a box of higher-grade masks, setting them on a counter where staff would see them. No announcement, no alarm. Denise noticed anyway. "Why those?" "Precaution," Mara said. "For staff in close contact." "Based on what?" Mara met her eyes, didn't flinch. "Based on patterns that don't fit." A beat passed, then Denise nodded once. "Fine, but don't start a panic." "I won't." Another patient seized, this one harder. The room surged forward to contain it. Mara stepped in not to take over but to anchor. She guided hands where they needed to be. She adjusted a bed rail. She lowered her voice until others unconsciously matched it. "Easy," she said. "Slow, we've got time." They didn't, but people worked better when they believed it. As the seizure broke, the man near the hallway shifted again, edging closer. Security intercepted him this time, voices low but firm. Mara watched the exchange. Watched the man's jaw tight, not in fear but irritation. He wasn't lost. She felt it then, fully formed. This night was going to get worse, not broader. The threat wouldn't change shape, but it would press harder, testing weak points. And the hospital, for all its protocols and titles, was already behind. Mara adjusted her gloves and checked the seal, breathing steady. She kept her voice down. She kept her movements small. Because early warnings only mattered if someone was ready to act on them, and she was. The wave hit without warning, even though everyone had been bracing for it. The ambulance bay doors flew open again, this time with no pause, no breath between moments. Gurneys rolled in back-to-back, wheels clattering, voices overlapping. The controlled bend of the department snapped into motion. "Clear a path. Vitals coming in. Where do you want him? Where do you want him?" There were no clean answers anymore. Mara stepped aside as the first stretcher passed, then moved with it, not touching, not leading, just staying close enough to see. The patient was conscious, barely. His eyes tracked movement, unfocused. His breathing was fast but shallow, chest fluttering instead of rising. No external trauma, no blood. His hands trembled against the sheet. The paramedic rattled off numbers. Heart rate high, blood pressure unstable. Oxygen saturation falling despite support. "That doesn't make sense," the resident said again, louder this time. Mara didn't look at him. She watched the patient's lips darken at the edges. She watched the faint sheen on his collar, identical to the first man's jacket. Uniform exposure. "Room 3, Denise ordered. "Move." They did, but room 3 was already compromised. The previous patient inside began coughing, sharp and dry, his monitor alarms rising in pitch. A nurse recoiled instinctively, then caught herself and stepped back in. Mara felt the first true crack in the system, not fear but overload. Too many variables, too little clarity. Another gurney arrived carrying a woman in her 40s. She was gasping, fingers digging into the rail, eyes wild. "I can't," she tried to say. The words never finished. Her body locked, then seized. "Seizure," someone shouted. The room surged. Too many hands reached at once. Mara stepped in, voice low, precise. "One person on airway, one on meds, everyone else back." The words cut through the noise because they were simple. A nurse hesitated, then obeyed. The resident followed a half-second later. Mara didn't touch the patient. She adjusted the space around her instead, moving bodies back, clearing air. She counted seconds under her breath, tracking the seizure pattern. This wasn't trauma-induced. This was systemic. She glanced toward the supply room. The decon fan was running now, pointed awkwardly toward a corner that didn't matter. Someone had tried. It wasn't enough. "Why is this happening?" A nurse whispered. No one answered. Security moved again near the hallway. The man in the clean jacket was gone. Mara noticed immediately. She scanned entrance, corridors, staff-only access. Her jaw tightened a fraction. Someone was using the chaos. Denise caught her look. "What?" "He left," Mara said quietly. "The man by the hallway." Denise frowned. "Security?" They didn't escort him out. Denise's eyes flicked to the guards. One shook his head slightly. "Lost him in the crowd." "Okay," Denise said, forcing calm. "Handle patients first." That was the right call. It didn't make it less dangerous. A new arrival came in coughing violently, blood flecking his lips, not from trauma but from strain. His skin was flushed, hot to the touch. Myra leaned close enough to smell him, not blood, not smoke. Something sharp, chemical but faint. Her stomach tightened, not with fear but confirmation. "Denise," she said softly, "we need to separate patients by symptoms. Now." Denise looked at her fully for the first time. "On whose authority?" Mara met her gaze. She didn't raise her voice. "On the authority of stopping this from spreading." A long second passed. Alarms screamed around them. Denise exhaled through her nose. "Fine, but you own it." "I do," Mara said. She moved immediately, not to a podium, not to the center, but along the edges, redirecting flow with small gestures and fewer words. "Respiratory here, neurological there. Anyone coughing stays back." Some questioned her, most didn't. They were out of options. As patients were shifted, something else became clear. Staff exposure was already happening. A tech rubbed his eyes too hard. A nurse leaned against a counter longer than necessary. Mara handed out higher-grade masks without comment. She replaced gloves herself, slow and deliberate, modeling the pace she wanted others to follow. "Slow," she said once. "Rushing makes mistakes." The resident snapped, "We don't have time to slow down." Myra looked at him, not cold, not kind, just steady. "Then we'll lose more." He swallowed and turned back to his patient. The ER settled into a new rhythm, not calm but contained. The wave had stopped growing, but it pressed against them, testing seams. Then a scream cut through everything, not from a patient, from down the hall. Mara turned as security sprinted past, radios blaring. A door slammed. Someone shouted, "He's not supposed to be back here." Mara didn't move toward the noise. She moved toward the board, scanning names, symptoms, times. She triangulated positions in her head. If someone was moving deliberately through the hospital, they'd aim for leverage, not chaos. Critical patients. Infrastructure. Air. She stepped to Denise's side. "If he's here," she said quietly, "he's not looking for help." Denise's face hardened. "Who are you?" Mara didn't answer that. She pointed instead. "Lock those doors, keep him away from patients. Let security do their job, but don't give him cover." Denise stared at her for a beat, then she nodded. "Do it." Mara exhaled slowly. The wave hadn't ended. It had revealed itself, and now the hospital was standing in it. The emergency department stopped feeling like a hospital and started feeling like a containment zone. The air carried a faint chemical bite now, subtle enough that some staff didn't notice it until their throats tightened. The decon fan hummed uselessly in a corner, fighting a problem that had already moved past it. Denise called out assignments with a voice that didn't crack, but her eyes kept flicking to the doors. "Respiratory in 4. Seizure patient stays in 2. Clear hallways. Security, where are you?" A guard leaned in, speaking fast. "We had a possible intruder attempt staff-only access. He's gone, we're sweeping." "Gone where?" Denise snapped. "Unknown." Mara watched Denise absorb the word. Unknown was not an answer. Unknown was a hole. A surgeon pushed through the crowd, scrubbing in as he walked, irritation leading him like a shield. Dr. Klein, trauma attending. The kind of confidence built on command and outcomes. "What is this?" he demanded, scanning the makeshift zones. "Why are my trauma bays rearranged?" Denise didn't flinch. "Because we have respiratory and neuro symptoms coming in that don't match blunt trauma. We're separating." Klein's eyes narrowed. "Who decided that?" Denise hesitated, just a fraction. Mara felt it, the moment when hierarchy tried to reassert itself, even as the floor shook under it. "The intern," Denise said finally, as if naming her cost something. Klein's gaze landed on Mara like a searchlight. "You." Mara stepped forward one pace. She didn't apologize, she didn't posture. "Yes. Are you trying to run my department?" "No," Mara said evenly. I'm trying to stop cross-exposure. Klein scoffed. We handle accidents every week. Protocol exists for a reason. This isn't an accident pattern, Myra replied. Klein opened his mouth to cut her off, but a monitor alarm interrupted him, sharp, insistent. A patient in room 4 suddenly desaturated, oxygen dropping fast. Airway? A nurse shouted. Klein snapped into motion. Move! The room surged toward the patient. The resident reached for the intubation tray with hands that were already shaking, adrenaline making him fast but sloppy. Mara followed, quietly staying one step behind the rush. Inside room 4, the patient's chest heaved. His face was turning a dull, dangerous gray. Spittle foamed at the corners of his mouth. Tube him, Klein ordered immediately. The resident positioned, laryngoscope in hand. Mara's eyes locked on the patient's neck. Swelling. Not the kind trauma created. Not the kind blood created. This was chemical-induced edema, fast and lethal. If they intubated normally, without decon, without isolation, they would aerosolize whatever was in that airway. They would contaminate the room further, expose staff, spread the crisis deeper into the hospital. Mara stepped forward. Stop, she said. The word landed in the room like a slap. Klein turned sharply. What did you say? Mara didn't raise her voice. Stop, don't intubate in here. The resident froze, caught between authority and the sudden stillness in Mara's tone. Klein's face tightened. Intern, get out of my bay. Mara held her ground. If you intubate here, you will aerosolize whatever he's carrying. You'll contaminate the airway team and the next patient. Use a closed system or move him to negative pressure. If you don't have that, you use a supraglottic airway as a bridge and mask protocols. You do not open his airway in the middle of an exposed zone. Silence. Only the patient's wet, desperate breathing. The nurse nearest the bed looked between them. Do we have a closed circuit? Respiratory shook his head. Not here, ICU does. Klein's eyes stayed on Mara. And you know this how? Mara didn't blink. Because his symptoms are consistent with inhalation exposure, not trauma. Because 2 staff have started coughing. Because your normal playbook will get more people sick. Klein's mouth tightened. He looked at the patient again, then at the resident. Fine, he snapped. Supraglottic, now. The resident moved fast. The airway was placed. Oxygen improved, slightly, not enough, but enough to buy time. Mara exhaled slowly. One crisis delayed was still a crisis, but time was currency. Klein pointed at her. You're coming with me? He marched out of the room into the hallway where noise returned like a tide. Denise watched them go, eyes sharp. Klein stopped near the nurse's station, turned to face Mara fully. You do not override attendings. Mara nodded once. I understand. Do you? Because you just did. I stopped an unsafe procedure in an unsafe environment, Mara said. That's my responsibility too. Klein leaned closer. You're an intern. Your responsibility is to learn. Mara met his stare. Then let me learn by keeping people alive. Klein's eyes narrowed, searching for arrogance, for fear. He found neither. That unsettled him. Who are you? He asked again, quieter now. Mara didn't answer. She didn't give him the satisfaction of explanation. Explanation was permission, and she wasn't asking for permission. A nurse called out, voice strained. We've got another incoming, 2 more, both with respiratory failure. Denise stepped in. We're out of isolation rooms. And decon's not ready, another voice added. Klein swore under his breath. The department was outgrowing its walls. Myra looked at Denise. We need to establish zones properly. Hot, warm, clean, staff rotation, PPE enforcement. Denise nodded slightly, but Klein cut in. And what? We turn the ER into a hazmat unit. We turn it into something that holds, Mara said, or it collapses. Klein stared at her, then looked away. He didn't like being told what reality was, but reality didn't care. A security guard ran past again. We found a jacket. He ditched it. Denise spun. Where? Near the stairwell, staff only. Mara's eyes sharpened. The clean jacket man was shedding layers, moving deeper. Klein saw the shift in her posture. You think he's connected? I think he's not lost, Mara said. Klein's jaw tightened. This is above your pay grade. Mara spoke softly. Patients don't care about pay grades. Denise looked between them. The charge nurse's voice dropped. If she's right, we're treating people while someone moves inside our hospital. Klein's face hardened. Security locks down, no one goes anywhere alone, we keep treating. Mara nodded. And we stop the exposure from spreading. Klein looked at her again, longer this time. He didn't say it, but Mara felt the shift, the beginning of reluctant recognition. Not respect yet, not trust. Just the realization that the intern was seeing things others weren't. The crisis wasn't changing. It was tightening, and Mara was already adjusting to it. The emergency department didn't become calm. It became disciplined. Mara didn't announce a takeover. She didn't gather staff into a circle or make speeches. She worked the way a scalpel worked, quiet, precise, cutting away what would kill them first. She started with space. "Denise," she said, low enough that only the charge nurse could hear, "I need 3 zones. Now, we can't keep mixing symptoms." Denise glanced at the hallway packed with bodies and equipment. "We don't have room." Mara's eyes tracked the department like a map. "We do, we're just using it wrong." She pointed, small movements, no drama. "That corner becomes clean, only staff and supplies. Triage stays at the doors. Anyone coughing or seizing stays in the warm zone. Anyone who came in from the scene, unassessed, stays hot until proven otherwise." Denise's mouth tightened. "You're talking like you've done this before." Mara didn't answer. She didn't need to. Denise turned and called out, voice sharp. "Listen up, we're splitting the department. No exceptions. If you cross zones, you change PPE. If you don't have PPE, you don't cross." Groans rose. Complaints tried to form. They died under Denise's stare. Mara moved immediately to the ambulance bay doors. The next wave wasn't coming yet, but the pressure stayed. She met the next paramedic at the threshold, hand raised, not stopping him, but controlling the entry. "Before you bring them in," Mara said. "Symptoms?" The paramedic blinked. Breathing issues, seizures, confusion. Any obvious trauma? Minor." Mara nodded once. "Keep them outside hot zone until we tag. Don't bring patients through clean." The paramedic looked past her at her badge. "Intern." His brow furrowed. Behind Mara, Denise's voice carried. "Do what she says." The paramedic swallowed. "Copy." It was subtle, but Mara felt it. The first time a system rerouted around her instructions without debate. Not because of title. Because the room had tasted failure and Mara offered structure. Inside, she created flow. She positioned a trauma tech at the threshold with tape and a marker. Simple tools, clear tags. "Red, yellow, green," she instructed. "Don't argue it. If they can walk, they wait. If they can't breathe, they don't." A nurse started to protest, but what if? Mara cut in gently. "If we debate, we lose minutes. If we lose minutes, we lose people." The nurse nodded, face tight, and did it. Mara assigned pairs without permission, not randomly, strategically. She matched the calmest nurse with the most panicked resident. She put the fastest tech with the oldest patient transporter. She placed respiratory therapists where they could work without being surrounded. When a junior nurse hovered near the hot zone entrance, eyes wide, Mara didn't say, "Calm down." She just gave her a task. "You," Mara said quietly. "Your job is to watch PPE. No one crosses without changing gloves. If you see someone touch their face, you stop them, even if it's Dr. Klein." The nurse stared. "Even if, especially if," Mara said. The nurse's shoulders lifted with the weight of permission. She nodded hard. "Okay." That was how Mara built control, by giving people boundaries they could enforce. Dr. Klein moved through the warm zone with irritation, scanning patients, trying to reclaim the department through sheer presence. He caught Mara directing a tech with 2 fingers and no raised voice. "This is turning into a circus," he said. Mara didn't look up from the patient board. It was a circus. Now it's lanes. Klein's mouth tightened. "You're playing incident commander." "I'm keeping your clinicians from inhaling whatever this is," Mara replied. "If they go down, you don't have a department." Klein's eyes narrowed, but he didn't have a counter. He pivoted to a patient who was coughing blood into a mask and started giving orders that finally fit the situation: short, practical, contained. Mara watched the shift. She didn't celebrate it. She just kept moving. She stopped at the oxygen supply, checked the gauges, then redirected a portable unit to the warm zone where it would matter most. She quietly pulled a crash cart into a corridor that had become the new airway lane, ensuring it was accessible without crossing zones. Denise came up beside her, voice lower now. ICU says they can spare one negative pressure room if we can move a patient without contaminating the hall. Mara's mind ran through the geometry instantly. We create a corridor. One path, no crossing. We put sheets up like barriers. We send the patient with minimal staff. We change PPE before and after. Denise studied her. You're not guessing. Mara's jaw tightened a fraction. No. Denise hesitated, then asked the question everyone kept circling. Where did you learn this? Mara didn't look at her. From watching people die when systems fail. It wasn't an answer, but it was the closest thing to truth Mara would give. As they set up the corridor, a commotion rose at the far end of the department. Security had cornered someone near the stairwell, shouting, hands reaching. Mara didn't run toward it. Running fed chaos. She stayed where the system needed her, eyes scanning. She saw it, the staff-only door near imaging, slightly ajar. A shadow moved behind it. Not security, not staff. The clean jacket man, changed now, hoodie up, head down, slipping deeper. Mara's pulse stayed steady. She didn't chase. Chasing made noise. Noise made panic. Panic created cover. She moved to Denise and spoke softly, almost casual. He's heading toward imaging. Denise's face hardened. How do you know? I can see him, Mara said. Denise's eyes flicked, but she couldn't see through the bodies and equipment. Mara could because she wasn't looking at what was loud. She was looking at what didn't belong. Denise spoke into her radio. Security, imaging corridor, staff-only door. A guard's voice crackled back. Copy. Mara watched the door close again. The shadow vanished. The crisis stayed the same, patients still arriving, staff still strained, but now the department had shape. Walls made of tape and discipline, a rhythm made of quiet commands. Dr. Klein passed Mara again, slower this time. He didn't apologize, he didn't praise. He just said, good call in room 4. Mara nodded once. Keep using closed systems when you can. Klein's jaw tightened at being instructed again, but he didn't argue. He walked away, already adapting. Mara turned back to the ambulance bay. The next gurney would come. The next complication would come. But the department wouldn't collapse just because the night demanded it. Not while Mara was still standing. The department held, barely. Tape lines on the floor became borders people respected. PPE checks slowed movement just enough to prevent careless exposure. The hot zone stayed hot, the clean zone stayed clean, and the warm zone absorbed the suffering in between. But nothing about the night became easier. It became sharper. A radio crackled near Denise. She leaned in, listening, then her face tightened in a way Mara hadn't seen yet. County says it might not be accidental, Denise muttered, eyes on Mara now. They think the crash was caused. Mara didn't react outwardly. Inside, she felt the final piece click into place. Based on what? She asked. Traffic cam, witness. Something about a vehicle driving into the pileup, Denise said, and chemical transport nearby. Mara's eyes went to the hot zone, the sheen on jackets, the coughs, the swelling. It fit too well. She looked at Denise. Then we treat this as a deliberate exposure until proven otherwise. Denise swallowed. That's not my call. It's our reality, Mara said. Dr. Klein joined them, wiping sweat from his brow with a gloved wrist. What are we hearing? Denise relayed it quickly. Klein's jaw flexed. So we're a hospital dealing with a hazmat event and possibly an active threat. Mara watched his eyes scan the ER. He wasn't just thinking clinically now. He was thinking like someone who understood that systems were targets. Lockdown? Klein asked security. A guard shook his head. Admin's hesitating. They don't want to trap people inside if what? Klein snapped. If more victims show up, they're already here. Mara didn't join the argument. She moved 2 steps away and looked at the entrances, front door, ambulance bay, staff hallway, stairwell access. Locking everything down created new problems. Leaving everything open invited worse ones. She turned back to Denise. We don't need a full lockdown to remove cover, she said quietly. We just need control of movement. 1 entry, 1 exit. Security at staff-only doors. No family members back here without verification. Denise nodded slowly. Okay. Klein didn't like being sidelined by a plan that wasn't his, but he was too smart to ignore what was working. Do it, he said to security. Now, security moved. The ER kept grinding. A teenage girl arrived shaking, eyes wide, breathing too fast. She clutched her throat like it was closing. Her mother, if she was her mother, kept shouting, she was fine, and then she was. Mara watched them from 10 feet away. The woman's shoes were too clean. Her hands were steady for someone terrified. The girl's symptoms were real. The adult's performance felt practiced. Mara didn't accuse. Accusations caused scenes, and scenes caused panic. She stepped close to the girl first, kneeling slightly to meet her eyes. "You're safe," Mara said softly. "Look at me. Breathe with me, in, out." The girl tried, coughed, her lips trembled. Mara looked up at the adult. "What's her name?" The woman blinked. "Emily. Last name?" A pause, too long. Ellis." Mara kept her face neutral. "No relation," she said quietly, more to herself than anyone else. She turned to Denise, voice low. "Verify her." Denise frowned. Now, Mara said. Denise motioned to a clerk. "Get ID, check chart history." The woman's eyes darted. She started to argue, loud, theatrical. Mara didn't match her volume. She gave the woman a calm stare that didn't budge. "If you want to help her, you'll cooperate," Mara said. The woman's mouth tightened. Her loudness faded. She stepped back, jaw rigid. Mara's attention returned to the girl. She kept her breathing slow, guiding the girl's rhythm. The girl's oxygen numbers improved slightly enough to buy seconds. Seconds mattered. Behind them, security called out. "We've got someone in imaging corridor." A thud, a shouted command, footsteps pounding. Mara's eyes lifted instantly. Imaging corridor was adjacent to the clean zone, supplies, oxygen, staff movement. If someone sabotaged that, the whole response collapsed. Klein started toward the noise. Denise reached for her radio. Mara raised one hand, not stopping them, but anchoring them. "Don't flood the corridor," she said quietly. "You'll create cover." Klein glared. "He's inside my hospital." "And he wants you running," Mara replied. "Keep security tight. You keep the ER stable. That's how you win." Klein's nostrils flared. His instinct was confrontation, but he had seen what chaos did. He stayed, barely holding his position like a man restraining his own impulse. Mara moved instead. Not running, walking fast, controlled. She slipped along the clean zone edge, using staff bodies as visual cover. She didn't announce herself. She didn't draw attention. The less she looked like a threat, the more she could see. At the edge of the imaging corridor, security had a man pinned against a wall, hoodie up, face half hidden. He struggled just enough to make it look chaotic. Mara's eyes went straight to his hands. One hand clenched something small, not a weapon, a keycard. The guard shouted, "Stop resisting." The man twisted, sharp, deliberate, trying to slip the keycard into a reader behind him. Mara moved in one step and placed her hand on his wrist, firm, exact, not violent, just final. His grip loosened. The keycard fell. Mara caught it before it hit the floor. The man's eyes snapped to her badge. Intern. For the first time, his expression changed, confusion, then recognition. "You're not," he started. Mara cut him off with calm. "He was trying to access restricted systems," she said to the guard. "Keep him face forward, hands controlled. Do not let him turn." The guard blinked, surprised by the precision. Then he obeyed. Mara looked at the reader he'd been reaching for. It wasn't a random door. It was a control access point to the imaging suite, adjacent to ventilation junctions, supply paths, and one of the few routes that bypassed triage. He wasn't trying to escape. He was trying to move the crisis. Mara pocketed the keycard without ceremony. Klein arrived late, breathing hard, eyes scanning. "What happened?" Mara kept her tone flat. "He's not here for help, he's here for access." Klein stared at her. "How do you know?" Mara didn't say. "Because this is how threats move inside crowded systems. Because you don't shout unless you want a reaction. Because people who panic don't aim for keycard readers." She said only, "Because he chose this door." Security tightened their grip. The man stopped struggling, face unreadable. Mara turned away before anyone could stare too long at her. Staring created questions, and questions created attention. She went back to the ER, where the true crisis still lived. Patients gasping, staff sweating, monitors screaming. As she crossed into the warm zone, a wave of dizziness hit her, brief, sharp, like the room tilted under her feet. Mara stopped, put one hand lightly on the wall, not for support. For calibration, she blinked once. slowed her breathing, checked her own body like it was another patient. Exposure was possible. Exhaustion was certain. She moved again. She didn't mention it. Denise met her at the border. "You okay?" Mara nodded. "Rotate staff more." No one stays in warm zone longer than 15 minutes without a check. Denise's eyes narrowed. "That sounds like you're protecting them," Mara said simply. Denise swallowed whatever question she had and nodded. The crisis hadn't changed. It had tightened into a vice: toxic exposure, limited resources, and now a deliberate human presence trying to exploit the chaos. And Mara, the intern, carried the weight of it without letting it show. By the time the clock crept past midnight, the emergency department felt like a place that had been held together by hands alone. Not technology, not protocol. Hands sealing masks, hands pressing gauze, hands keeping airways open, hands gripping bed rails so fear didn't spill out into the room. Mara moved through it with measured steps, like she was walking on ice that could break if she made sudden moves. Her body felt heavier now, not dramatic fatigue, not collapse, just the deep, silent drain of sustained exposure and decision-making. She noticed small changes in herself before anyone else could. A moment longer to focus on a monitor, a brief pulse behind her eyes, the taste of metal in her mouth. She cataloged it, filed it, kept going. A nurse met her at the warm zone boundary. "We're out of clean airway kits," she said, voice tight. "ICU sent one closed circuit, but it's already in use." Mara nodded. "How many respiratory failures incoming?" "2 confirmed, 1 pediatric." Pediatric. The word tightened the room even before it arrived. Denise stepped up, face drawn. "EMS says it's a kid 8, maybe 9. Breathing's bad." "They're 5 minutes out." Dr. Klein overheard and came closer. His face was set in that grim way surgeons wore when they saw the math ahead. "We have 1 clean airway setup," he said, "and it's occupied." Mara's eyes moved to the patient using it, an adult male, intubated with a closed system in a makeshift negative corridor. He was unstable but holding. If they pulled the circuit, he would crash. If they didn't, a child might not survive the arrival. Klein spoke first. "We bridge the kid with a bag and get another circuit." "There isn't another," the respiratory therapist said quietly. "Not here." A silence fell, brief, heavy, because everyone understood what was being asked without naming it. Mara felt the moral tension sharpen into a point. This wasn't a puzzle. There wasn't a clever trick. There was scarcity, and scarcity demanded choices. She stepped closer to the adult's bed, eyes scanning the tube placement, ventilator readings, the sweat on the patient's brow. He was alive because someone had created a controlled environment around him. Remove it, and he became a source of spread and a casualty. She turned back to Denise. "Is the decon corridor holding?" "Yes," Denise said. "Barely." Mara nodded once. "Then we keep the circuit where it is." Klein's eyes narrowed. "And what? We let the kid die." Mara didn't flinch at the words. She hated them. She didn't let them move her. "We don't let anyone die," she said softly. "We change the plan." Klein's jaw flexed. "There is no plan." Mara looked at the warm zone. She saw the supplies, the staff, the paths. She saw the one thing nobody wanted to use because it carried risk: her own body. "I'll take the pediatric airway in the hot edge," Mara said, voice level. "We bridge with supraglottic and controlled bagging under strict PPE, minimal staff. We don't move her through clean until stabilized." Denise stared at her. "That's exposure." "It's controlled exposure," Mara replied, "and it keeps the circuit for the intubated patient." Klein's eyes locked on her. "You're an intern." Mara's gaze didn't drop. "Then let me be useful." Klein opened his mouth, then stopped. He wanted to forbid it. He wanted to command her away from risk. But he couldn't because he had no better answer. Denise's voice dropped. "Mara, you've already?" "I'm fine," Mara said. It wasn't true, not fully, but she could still function. Function was what mattered. The ambulance bay doors opened again, and the sound of the gurney wheels over tile cut into the room like a blade. The child came in small and rigid, her body too still for her age. A cheap pink jacket, a bracelet on her wrist. Her eyes were open but unfocused, mouth parted in an effort to breathe that wasn't working. Her father followed, face destroyed by fear. "Please," he kept saying. "Please, please." Denise stepped toward him, trying to redirect him back, but his hands reached for the gurney like he could hold his daughter's lungs open if he just tried hard enough. Mara moved to his side, not touching him, not commanding him. She spoke low, calm. "Stay with me," she said. "If you panic," she panics, "I need you steady." The man's eyes snapped to her. "Is she going to die?" Mara held his gaze. She didn't promise miracles. She didn't preach. She gave him something he could hold. "She's alive right now," Mara said. "And I'm going to keep her that way." His throat bobbed. He nodded, a broken motion, and stepped back as staff moved in. Mara entered the hot edge with the child, PPE sealed, mask tight, gloves double layered. She felt her own breath louder inside the mask, the sound of herself becoming part of the environment she was trying to control. She placed a hand on the child's shoulder, not to comfort, but to stabilize. "Look at me," Mara said softly, close enough that the child could hear through the noise. "Breathe slow, I'm here." The child's eyes flickered. Mara worked with restraint, no frantic motions, no dramatics. She placed a supraglottic airway smoothly, almost gently. She directed the respiratory therapist with short commands. "Slow bag, watch chest rise, don't overventilate." The therapist nodded, following her cadence. The oxygen saturation crept upward. Not enough. Then a little more. The father sobbed once, loud, uncontrolled, and then clamped his hand over his mouth like he was ashamed of the sound. Mara didn't look at him. She kept her eyes on the child. A wave of dizziness hit again, stronger now. The room blurred at the edges for half a second. Mara's hand tightened on the bed rail. She didn't fall. She didn't sway. She forced her breath into a slower pattern. In, out, in, out. She checked herself the way she checked patients. Symptoms, severity, function. She could still function, so she continued. The child stabilized enough to move. Mara directed the path like a chess line, no crossing zones, no detours, minimal staff. Denise met them at the boundary, eyes wide with something close to fear. "You're pale," she said under her breath. Mara didn't answer. She guided the gurney through the corridor, sealed and controlled. When the child reached the negative pressure space, Mara stepped back and peeled her gloves off carefully, disposing of them with ritual precision. She washed her hands longer than anyone else would. Her fingers trembled slightly when she turned the tap off. Klein approached quietly, voice lower now. "You just took on the risk so we didn't have to choose." Mara's eyes stayed on the sink. "We still chose," she said. "I just absorbed it." Klein's expression tightened. "That's not sustainable." Mara finally looked at him. Her gaze was steady, but there was a strain beneath it now, like a cable under tension. "Nothing about tonight is sustainable," she said. A radio crackled nearby. Security's voice was urgent. "We're moving the suspect. He had a keycard. Admin wants to know what doors he accessed." Mara's stomach tightened, not with fear, with focus. Because if he had access, it wasn't only about where he went. It was about what he tried to reach. Mara dried her hands, slow and controlled. She turned back toward the ER. Her body was paying now, headache, fatigue, the faint burn in her throat. The cost had arrived and it was real. But she walked anyway, because the crisis still wasn't finished. And neither was she. The hospital didn't know it was holding its breath. It was still moving, patients treated, staff rotating, security sweeping. But beneath the motion was a waiting tension, like everyone sensed the night hadn't spent its worst moment yet. Mara felt it in the way conversations shortened, in the way doors closed a little harder, in the way Denise checked the board twice as if the names might rearrange themselves. Mara stood at the clean zone edge, watching security escort the hoodie man down the hall. His hands were cuffed. His head remained lowered. He looked like a person who had failed, not a person who had been caught. That distinction mattered. "Where did he go?" Mara asked, voice quiet. A guard shook his head. "He didn't get far, tried staff-only doors, imaging corridor, stairwell. We stopped him." "Stopped him from going through," Mara said. "Not stopped him from doing something." The guard frowned. "What do you mean?" Mara's eyes flicked to Denise's station. The patient board, the supply lane, the oxygen manifold access panel near the back corridor. She didn't answer with theory. She answered with action. "Denise," Mara said softly, "I need a list of what he touched. Doors, readers, any access attempt." Now, Denise looked up sharply. "Security?" "Security can tell you where they saw him," Mara replied. I need what the system saw. Denise hesitated, then turned to the clerk. Pull access logs, timestamps, staff-only doors. The clerk blinked. We don't do it, Denise snapped. Now, Mara moved toward the hallway junction where warm zone and clean zone almost met almost. She stopped at the line of tape and didn't cross. Her restraint was constant. It wasn't virtue, it was survival. Dr. Klein approached, face drawn with exhaustion. He's in custody, he said. We focus on patients. We do, Mara replied. But custody doesn't undo contamination, it doesn't undo intent. Klein's eyes narrowed. You think he actually did something? Mara nodded. He didn't look like someone escaping, he looked like someone checking a box. Klein's jaw flexed, irritated by the implication because it meant the knight still had a blade hidden somewhere. Denise returned, holding a printout with trembling fingers. Okay, she said. Access logs. He tried imaging corridor, denied. He tried stairwell, denied. He tried respiratory storage, denied. Mara's eyes sharpened. Respiratory storage? Denise swallowed. Yeah, twice. Klein's expression darkened. He wanted airway supplies. Mara nodded. Or he wanted to remove them or redirect them. Denise pointed lower on the page. And he got one thing, one successful access. Mara didn't speak, she just waited. Denise read it out, voice tight. Maintenance junction B back corridor, near ventilation controls. A stillness fell, not loud, not dramatic. The kind of quiet that came when a room recognized a threat that didn't need a gun. Klein spoke first. Ventilation controls are not in our scope. They're in our air, Mara said. Denise looked at Mara. What does this mean? Mara's mind ran through it with cold clarity. A hospital's ventilation system wasn't a movie villain's dream. It was complicated, compartmentalized. But maintenance junctions existed for a reason: access to dampers, airflow direction, pressure zones. Even a small adjustment could move contaminated air from one area to another. And they had built their fragile safety on zones. If someone compromised airflow, zones became illusions. Mara turned to security. Who has eyes on maintenance junction B? A guard shook his head. No one, that corridor's restricted. Mara nodded once. Then we assume it's been touched. Klein's voice rose, frustration cutting through his fatigue. So what? He turned a knob and now we're all contaminated. Mara looked at him steadily. Not all, but if he redirected airflow, he could have pushed warm zone air into clean. Denise's face blanched. We've had staff in clean supplies charting. Mara didn't let panic spread. She spoke calmly, each word deliberate. We don't assume collapse, we verify, we isolate, we correct. Klein stared at her. How? Mara pointed, minimal movement. Facilities, now we need airflow checks. We need dampers verified. We need negative pressure confirmed where we think it is. Denise grabbed her radio. Facilities to ER, emergency, now. The reply came delayed, groggy. This is not optional, Denise snapped. Mara turned to Klein. Until facilities confirms, clean zone is no longer clean. Treat it as warm, rotate staff out, replace supplies that were exposed. Klein swore under his breath. That's going to slow everything. It will prevent spread, Mara replied. Security shifted uneasily. And the suspect? Mara's gaze stayed steady. He's a symptom. The system is the threat. Facilities arrived. A man in a faded polo, eyes wide, clearly pulled out of sleep. What's going on? Mara held up the access log. Maintenance Junction B was accessed during a chemical exposure event. We need to confirm airflow hasn't been redirected into treatment zones. The man blinked. That junction controls? Say it, Mara said calmly. He swallowed. It's a damper point. It can shift airflow between two corridors. Denise's voice tightened. Which corridors? Facilities glanced at the map on the wall. Back corridor and, he paused, face tightening, clean supply hallway. Klein's face changed. A hard, quiet anger. That's where my staff has been walking. Mara didn't let her expression shift. She stayed level. Can you check it? Facilities nodded quickly. Yes, but I need access and I need... You have it, Mara said. She didn't look at security when she spoke, but her voice was clear. Escort him. No one touches anything until he confirms settings. If it's been changed, we reverse it. Then we flush the corridors. Security moved immediately. No debate now. As they left, Denise looked at Mara, voice low. You caught it. Mara shook her head once. The log caught it, I just asked the right question. Denise's eyes narrowed. Interns don't ask those questions. Mara didn't respond. Minutes stretched. Patients still came. Treatment still happened. But everything carried the weight of uncertainty now, like the air itself was suspect. Mara forced staff rotations even as people resisted. She pulled nurses out who didn't want to leave. She reassigned tasks so the most exposed staff could sit and breathe in monitored spaces. A young resident tried to argue. We can't stop. Mara's voice stayed quiet. You don't stop, you rotate, you survive. The resident's shoulders dropped, he obeyed. Facilities returned with security. His face was pale. It was adjusted, he said, slightly. Not fully open, but enough to push airflow toward clean supply. Denise made a sound in her throat, half anger, half fear. Mara nodded once. Reverse it. It's reversed, Facilities said quickly. We flushed airflow. We can increase negative pressure in the corridor temporarily, but it'll strain the system. Do it, Klein said immediately. Facilities hesitated. If it trips, Mara spoke softly, then we manage it, but we don't leave it compromised. Facilities nodded and moved away. Klein stared at Mara like he was seeing her properly for the first time, not as an intern, not as a helper, as a person who had stepped into the gap where systems failed. How did you know to look there? He asked. Mara met his gaze. Her voice was steady, but her face showed fatigue now, real human cost. I didn't know, she said. I suspected, and I couldn't afford to be wrong. Klein's jaw tightened. That's not intern thinking. Mara's eyes flicked briefly to the warm zone, where a nurse coughed into her sleeve and corrected herself, wiping down instead. Tonight isn't an intern night, Mara said. The confrontation wasn't a fight. It was a correction, a quiet reversal of a sabotage attempt, achieved through observation, restraint, and systems thinking. No applause, no spotlight, just the air in the hospital becoming safer again, one careful adjustment at a time. And the ER, battered but still standing, exhaled without realizing it had been holding its breath. The first thing Mara noticed when the worst of the night passed was the sound. Not alarms, those still existed, still beeped and rang in corners, but the absence of panic. The voices were lower now. The footsteps had returned to a steadier rhythm. Even the air felt different after Facilities reversed the damper and flushed the corridor, as if the hospital had stopped breathing through clenched teeth. Dawn didn't arrive with color. It arrived with exhaustion. A pale band of light crept across the ambulance bay windows, turning the glass into a weak mirror. Staff moved like people underwater, slow, deliberate, conserving what little energy remained. Mara stood at a sink and washed her hands again, not because they were dirty, but because the ritual anchored her. Soap, warm water, 30 seconds, dry, repeat. Her throat still burned faintly. The headache lingered behind her eyes like a dull pressure. When she swallowed, she felt the irritation that came from breathing through masks and air that hadn't been trustworthy. She had been exposed to something. Not enough to collapse, enough to feel the cost. Denise came up beside her, rubbing a hand over her face. The charge nurse looked older than she had 6 hours ago. Peds is stable, Denise said quietly. Mara nodded once, a small release in her chest. Good. The adult on the closed circuit? Denise asked. Holding, Mara said, for now. Denise stared at Mara's hands. You're shaking. Mara looked down. One finger trembled slightly as she set the paper towel down. She closed her fist once, then opened it again slowly until the tremor eased. It's fine, Mara said. Denise didn't argue. She just stood there, letting silence do what words couldn't. Dr. Klein walked toward them, gown loosened, hair damp with sweat. The surgeon's anger had burned itself out. What remained was something quieter, respect, maybe, or confusion. Security passed behind him with the hoodie man, now subdued and exhausted, head still down. Police followed, faces stern. Their presence in the ER felt wrong, invasive, but nobody had the energy to react. Klein watched them go. Admin's already talking, he said. There'll be reports, meetings, they'll want timelines. Denise scoffed weakly. They always want timelines after. Klein's eyes stayed on Mara. They'll want names too. Mara didn't respond. Klein took a step closer. You should be in that conversation. Mara finally looked at him. Her eyes were tired, clear, unflinching. "The conversation doesn't save patients," she said. Klein's jaw tightened. "You saved patients." Mara's expression didn't change. "The team did." Denise let out a slow breath, almost a laugh without humor. "You're impossible." Mara didn't deny it. A clerk approached Denise with a phone. "Admin wants you, and they want the intern." Denise glanced at Mara, then back at the clerk. "Tell them we're still stabilizing. They can wait." "They said," Denise's voice sharpened, a blade honed by the night. "They can wait." The clerk fled. Klein watched Denise, then Mara. "That's not going to be the end of it." Mara nodded. "It rarely is." A nurse passed by with red-rimmed eyes, then stopped in front of Mara as if pulled by something she didn't understand. The nurse's hands were trembling. She looked young, new enough that the night had probably carved itself into her memory permanently. "You told me to stop people from touching their face," the nurse said softly. "I did." Mara nodded. "Good." The nurse swallowed. "I stopped Dr. Klein." Klein's mouth twitched, not a smile, but something close. "You did," he said. The nurse's eyes flicked between them. "I thought he was going to yell." Mara's voice stayed quiet. "You protected people. That matters." The nurse nodded, like she hadn't heard that sentence enough in her life, then walked away. Mara moved toward the patient board, checking names and vitals one last time, making sure the lines made sense. Her mind didn't let go easily. Control was hard to release after a night like this. Denise followed her. "Your charts are incomplete," she said. Mara looked at the board. "I'll finish them." Denise blinked. "Now, yes." Denise stared at her like she couldn't decide whether to be angry or impressed. "You've been running this place for hours and you're worried about charting." Mara's eyes stayed on the patient list. "Charting is where people disappear if you don't protect them," she said. Denise didn't respond. She understood more than she wanted to admit. Mara sat at a workstation in what had been the clean zone, now re-cleared, reconfirmed, and started writing. Her hands were slower than usual, but accurate. Each sentence was plain, each detail mattered. Symptoms, treatments, timing, decisions, no hero language, just truth. Klein stood behind her for a moment, then spoke in a lower voice, almost reluctant. "What's your background, Mara?" Mara kept typing. "Hospital," she said. "That's not what I mean." Mara paused, her finger hovered over the keyboard. Then she continued typing. Klein exhaled through his nose. "Fine. Keep your secrets." Mara didn't look up. "They're not secrets," she said softly. "They're just not for tonight." Klein stood there another second, then walked away. When Mara finally finished the last chart, the department was quieter. Not peaceful, never that, but settled. Staff were sitting now, slumped against walls, sipping water like it was medicine. Someone cried silently in a corner. Someone stared at a blank wall, eyes empty. Denise approached with a paper cup of coffee. She held it out without ceremony. Mara hesitated, took it. Denise's eyes stayed on her, steady now. "You weren't just an intern," Denise said. Mara didn't correct her. She didn't confirm it either. She just held the coffee between both hands, letting the warmth seep into her fingers. Across the hall, administrators gathered with clipboards, already forming a circle of questions. Police spoke in clipped tones. Reports were being borne. Mara watched it all from the edge, then turned away. She walked down the hallway toward the staff exit, moving slowly, the way you move after carrying something too heavy for too long. Her shoulders didn't slump. Her head didn't bow. She simply left the spotlight before it could find her. And the hospital kept breathing, quietly, imperfectly, because someone had held it together when it mattered.